Hey, Dennis, you're running this motherfucking show. I'm halfway through the end unless I get another bottle of wine sitting by me. Okay?
Dennis! Get him a bottle! For Christ's sake, Dennis!
What do you want, motherfucker?
Bukowski was telling me, if your parents begin to like your work, it's getting bad, you know. And if the cops are around, something good must be happening. And what you need is life. Your work has to be alive. You gotta, you know, drink, write, and fuck. That was his advice.
And I heard him flick his bick. And then I heard like the singeing of hair, you know, and I looked over and I could see him, and the flame was up really high, and he went like, and then he went, Argh!
He called me and said, you motherfucker, you put something in my wine. And I said, no, I didn't. He said, yes. He said, yes, you put LSD in my wine because you want to fuck my wife.
Oh yeah, the time he pulled this blade on the maitre d' at the Polo Lounge. There was that.
The cop said, you know, what are you doing? Stop. And he said, I'm going to throw the couch through the window. And the cop drew his gun and said, no, you're not.
What they called me in the bar in the old days was a good duker. That's the ultimate compliment.
Finally, I see him across the street from me, and he's unzipped himself, and he's taking his cock out. And he's not waving it, but it's just dangling there, and he's running up and down the street, and people are screaming and horrified. And finally they gather around him. Call the police! They're covering their children's eyes. Call the police!
The creative act is done in that goddamn machine right here. See this fucking thing? That's where it's done.
He talked a lot about his sexual prowess. He referred to his penis as his purple onion.
I saw him looking at me, and I ducked quickly forward, ducking my head into the night. It was move forward. You never say duck and ducking. That's the first thing you learn, you know. But I fucked it up because I'm drunk on wine. Forgive me. You have my soul and I have your money. I'll tell you something else occurred to me now, since you guys want to listen to things, want to listen to some shit. I feel like throwing this beer right in your face.
Why?
I'll tell you why. I always thought sometime in my life this time might come a little bit. Like guys marching in on me with cameras and all that shit. Somehow I almost felt it and knew it. And I was always going to crash it down and say, jam it up your ass. You know, the young blondes with the tight pussies came too late. The cameras came too late. Don't grin at me like that, it's true. They came too late, I'm too strong. The gods have really put a good shield over me, man. They really have. I've been toughened up at the right time and the right place. They're still good to me.
Lawrence Ferlinghetti up in San Francisco invited Bukowski to go to San Francisco to read at the City Lights Poets Theater. I had never heard him read, actually. It was very interesting. We just met, we started to develop a relationship, and bang, this thing happened. So I said, I'm going to travel. Now, I had this minuscule budget. I decided to shoot in black and white.
City Lights in the last year has started presenting American poets who I believe are major writers in this country. And at the moment, like, what else is happening besides Bukowski? Thank you.
We go up in the plane, he's drinking scotch. He got pretty drunk and a little silly. And I was shooting the whole thing.
No, I'll be all right. I'll be all right. I'll be all right. Nervous? I wish I were more nervous. You read better when you're a little nervous, you know. Really, it's like, you know, before a fight or something. You're nervous.
He arrives in San Francisco for this reading at Ferlinghetti's Poets Theater, and my God, it was like the second coming. We walked into this big gymnasium, and there were bleachers set up, and, you know, there were like 600-700 people there.
Hey, you're lining up around the corner. You have a little pot on the stage I can vomit in?
Yeah,
No, I'm not kidding.
We'll get
Cheap
another
Italian wine, man. You guys really fucked me up.
He was a little drunk, and I think he was building himself up, and I think he was a little scared.
I'm in great shape. Down here.
Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Charles Bukowski. The poetry readings he did in Los Angeles were, you know, be 15 people, 20 people. You know, you get 30 people, it was a crowd. And here we walked into hundreds and hundreds, and it was a loud, rowdy audience.
Do I know you? One more beer. I'll take you all of you.
And at the same time, there was a certain electricity in the air. He didn't have to share the podium. This was a Bukowski event. Bukowski was a fairly well-known underground figure in Los Angeles at the time because he wrote a column at the LA Free Press called The Notes of a Dirty Old Man. One week he wrote this article in there about going to San Francisco to read and having these punk, asshole, stupid filmmakers along, and he was trying to kind of help them along and organizing this and that as these people bumble through and asking stupid questions and so on. It was quite an entertaining, kind of funny piece. So I read it, and I saw him later, and I said, he said, "Hank," I said, "I read that article." He says, "Yeah, baby, what'd you think?" I said, "Well, I thought it was full of shit, man." I said, you forget, I have the film. You're the guy who's drunk on the plane making a fool out of yourself, and you made me." He says, "Hey, baby, when I write, I'm the hero of my shit." And he says, "You got your film? You do your film."
Born like this, into this, as the chalk faces smile, as Mrs. Death laughs, as political landscapes dissolve, as the oily fish spit out their oily prey. We are born like this, into hospitals which are so expensive that it's cheaper to die, into lawyers who charge so much it's cheaper to plead guilty, into a country where the jails are full and the madhouses closed, into a place where the masses elevate fools into rich heroes. Born into this, walking and living through this, dying because of this, castrated, debauched, disinherited because of this. The fingers reach toward an unresponsive God. The fingers reach for the bottle, the pill, the powder. We are born into the sorrowful deadliness. There will be open and unpunished murder in the streets. It will be guns and roving mobs. Land will be useless. Food will become a diminishing return. Nuclear power will be taken over by the many. Explosions will continually shake the earth. Radiated men will eat the flesh of radiated men. The rotting bodies of men and animals will stink in the dark wind. And there will be the most beautiful silence never heard. Born out of that, the sun hidden there, awaiting the next chapter.
His full name was Henry Charles Bukowski, Jr., and his father called him Henry with a very strong, gruff voice. So Hank was sort of the nickname for Henry. And Charles, just Charles Bukowski, especially being a writer, sounded a little better than Henry Bukowski.
Shit, I don't know if I can make this on just 2 bottles and maybe a 3-bottle rating. Liquor's like a symphony or like a classical song or something. You don't use it as a downer, you use it as to leap up into the sky, or when you're in pain, or when you have depression. Now, if I start reading this poem and I hear this man's voice rising above the sound of my poem, I'm going to go over to him and kick his living ass right out of the thing. Physically. I'm going to kick his ass right out of this goddamn hall. So watch it, man. I'll take you like a motherfucker.
When did you realize you were a writer, that you had this talent?
Nobody ever realizes they're a writer. They only think they're a writer.
So when did you think you were a writer?
Well, I guess I was about 13 years old. And I was covered with these boils, and my first writing I had this notebook, for school. I just found a pencil and I started writing, and I filled this notebook full of words. I guess that was the first time the mechanism had exposed itself. And it felt pretty good sitting there writing in a notebook with a pencil. I wrote on and on. It seemed a very easy, nice thing to do, and it still remains an easy, nice thing to do.
He said on a tape I have somewhere, I know exactly when I became a writer. It was on such a delving day. I love that when he said that. Such a delving day when I sat down and I wrote about a man with one arm who blasted people out of the sky, Manfred von Richthofen. And my father saw that little short story and he tore it up. I would say after that he was a writer. That was it. He was going to LA City College. It's still there on Vermont. And he walked into the journalism class.
I had 2 years of college, but I didn't do anything. I just laid on the lawn, missed classes, and I couldn't get a job as a journalist. They say fill out an application, we'll let you know. And it's a very hard job to get on a newspaper. It's
so
very
it's not your decision that you didn't work as a journalist?
No, I think if they had hired me, I would have been a journalist. In a way, I'm glad they didn't, because what could I write about?
Did you ever went to the army?
Oh, no.
How you managed it not to go there?
The psychiatrist would not take me. He asked me, "You believe in the war?" I said, "No." "You willing to go to the war?" I said, "Yes." He said, "You're a very intelligent man. Do you come to a party at my house next Wednesday night? We're going to have artists, writers, painters, lawyers." I want you to come to my party next Wednesday night. Will you come to my party? I said, no. He said, okay, you can go. I said, what do you mean I can go? He says, you don't have to go to the war. I smiled.
When I first came to the United States and fell in love with American literature and music and jazz and the whole shebang, really, I just fell for it. It was very uncool in England to be, beholding to America, but I was Irish, so I was forgiven, and I just got lost in the poetry of the place names, and City Lights was an important stop-off from me. So I picked up a few of Hank's early books, Love is a Dog from Hell, Hot Water Music, and I started to discover a new kind of writing that had a directness away from the beats which I'd started out with. The beats were a connection for an Irishman because of, you could eat the language, and it was rich and prosaic. But here was a guy who was like, look, no time for metaphor. I was like, can we just get straight down to the bone, to the marrow of the bone?
It's not the large things that send a man to a madhouse. Death he's ready for, or murder, incest, robbery, fire, flood. No, it's a continuing series of small tragedies that send a man to the madhouse. Not the death of his love, but a shoelace that snaps with no time left. With each broken shoelace, out of 100 broken shoelaces, one man, one woman, one thing enters a madhouse. So be careful when you bend over.
I have to shoot a portrait now.
Well, let's get the picture out of the way.
All right.
Michael, do I look
Close
good?
together.
And the definition of sex.
Sex is something you do when you can't sleep.
Who was your first woman?
Well, I was the 300-pound whore.
Jesus.
I didn't have my first piece of ass till I was 24 years old.
Really?
Well, I wasn't a pretty guy, and I didn't have any money. I was a bum.
Yeah.
Sorry, I never went to the high school ball or anything like that. I was an outcast. So I met this lady in the bar. And, she seemed to like me. First woman ever liked me, She was big, but she was a woman. What the hell? And I was drunk, and she was drunk. We drank our beer, and then I got into it. So I worked, and I worked, and I worked, and I worked, because I wanted to prove I was a man, first time. Boy, I really tried. I said, boy, if this is sex, it sure is lousy. This is what they've been talking about in the high school locker rooms. So I don't know if I made it, I probably did. But anyhow, I woke up, we're both laying there, and she's snoring on her back. And I look over, this huge beast is laying there. And we'd broken the bed, both legs and the butt. We were like on a hill. The bed was down like that. So, then I rushed to my pants, my wallet was missing. I said, you fucking whore, you took my wallet. She said, no, I didn't. I said, get out of here, you bitch. I said, I don't know where you got it, up your cunt, this room up there. I started to learn how to talk this way. And I tied up the legs. While I was tying up the legs of the bed, I reached under, I felt something on the rug, it was my wallet. Oh, that poor little girl. I felt awful, you know. Forget the image I have of her. And I said, oh, shit, that she may not have been much, but I accused her wrongly. So, right away, I ran down to the bar where I'd met her. Evidently, she told the bartender, and I walked in, I said, listen, yes, I forget her name. I said, I saw this Marie here. The guy said, we can't serve you.
I think one of the reasons Bukowski wandered around the country was very simply a young man's need to see his country. And I think the other reason was he wanted to delve into life. He needed experience. And so he bought a ticket on Trailways, and he went all the way to Florida, as far as he could go. Now, he said to get as far away from my father as possible. Probably that's true. Then he headed back through New Orleans, and he was in El Paso. All through the 40s, he lived in one rooming house or one little cold water hotel room after another, looking for that golden sentence, you know, wanting to write that story that would put him up there in the charts.
I would get a common laborer's job somewhere for a week or two, then live in a cheap room and type. I used to live on one candy bar a day. Cost a nickel. I always remember the candy bar was called Payday. That was my payday, 5 cents. And that candy bar tasted so good. I'd have it at night. I'd take one bite, and it was so beautiful. I wrote 4 or 5 short stories a week during this time, and I had them out everywhere. They came bouncing back.
He was looking for his art, and he got rejections. And basically what he was getting, you're not good enough. Not you're not good. You're not good enough. And he heard it, and he understood it. Now, at that point, you can make a choice. Oh, well, to hell with it. Throw it out. I'm going to go get a profession, do something. Bukowski never did that.
I was laying in bed one night, and I said, I'll just quit. To hell with it. And another voice in me said, don't quit. Save a tiny little ember, a spark, and never give them that spark, because as long as you have that spark, you can start the greatest fire again. I was working at a ladies' dress shop, and they made me work 2 hours overtime. I still kept the spark. I said, I will not quit. I will not let them kill me. So I'm walking out, and 2 guys in the office smoking cigars. Hey, Bukowski, come here a minute. They were laughing at me, and I knew they were laughing at me because I was just a slave, and I'm standing there. So I went home. It was a very long walk, and I remember the trees were frozen. It was in winter. It was in St. Louis, and the landlady had put these letters under my door. And I opened the one, and it said, we've accepted your short story. I said, oh, the fire I saved has a chance. But the funniest thing is they took a bad story.
The young writer growing up in the 30s and 40s wanted to be in Harper's, Atlantic Monthly. That's where Hemingway and Saroyan, that's where the heroes published.
I don't think it was quite the market for it. The main magazines during the 40s were pretty much published by Eastern intellectuals. John Steinbeck had a hard time getting recognized. Western writers just were not very much appreciated and recognized as they are today.
Let me tell you the story of the first time I read Bukowski. It was really, really one of those just happenstance things. I was about 25 at the time. I was in the bookstore with this girl that I really, really wanted to fuck, but she was just my friend. And I told the book clerk, he asked me if he could help me. And I said, yeah, there's this guy I've been reading about. People have been telling me about this guy named Bukowski. You know anything about this guy? And the book clerk, like, Bukowski, geez, that's my favorite. Come here, to the back room. Takes me to the back room, you know, where he keeps all of his Bukowski stash. And he goes up to the top shelf, and he pulls down some books, and he hands me this book. He goes, yeah, this is Bukowski's latest. And he hands me this book. He hands me more all the time. He says, this is his latest one. You're just great. You know, if you don't know the man, you should know the man. So I picked up the book and opened it, and it just fell to this page, right here, page 100. And the first poem I read was called Oh Yes. There are worse things than being alone, but it often takes decades to realize this. And most often when you do, it's too late. And there's nothing worse than too late. So I just closed the book, handed it back to him, but I never forgot that poem. There are worse things than being alone. And like I said, the reason I mentioned the girl that I was with, because I sort of looked at her in a different light after that. I looked at her and like, you know, there are worse things than being alone. And I don't want to wait until it's too late. You know, so go away. Go away. Let me just worry about other things besides you. So that was my first introduction to Bukowski.
I was 24, 25, and she was around 35, and she just accepted me. I don't understand it, but she was a real fine-looking woman with body and good sense, a little bit mad.
This is Jane. This is from her high school yearbook. There are many love poems, early love poems to Jane. It was the first woman he ever really had a relationship with. She was 10 years older than he was. She was born in 1910 and he was born in 1920.
He seemed to be all alone, except for this woman he lived with that he would refer to sometimes in a derogatory way, the way men refer to women. I saw her once, and it fit his description of her, which was she had a fat ass and was good to lean up against in the wintertime.
She had beautiful legs, wore high heels, knew how to cross her legs with the skirt just so, kicking the heel like this and talking all kinds of shit, you know.
If you like them big, you know, she did not have the good looks of sophistication or a classy woman.
With beautiful legs, you always figure, even though you've only been there once or twice, there might be something else up there besides a cunt, you know? There might be something really marvelous this time. It could be a cunt, but it could be... There's something about looking at the legs makes you dream. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a cunt, but I'm saying you always imagine some extra magic when you're looking at the outside portion of the female.
She would just take off for a month and leave him, and then come back only because she'd exhausted all those opportunities out there or was sick and tired of what was going there and would come back to him. He was kind of like a home base only. They didn't have a really domestic life together.
It was a continuous going into bars, getting into trouble, getting kicked out of rooms. It was a tension that just...
To find your lady already drunk, dirty dishes in the sink, the dog unfed, the flowers unwatered, the bed unmade, the ashtrays full of punched-out, lipstick-smeared cigarettes.
Those days were so wild, man. We're always drunk, getting kicked out. It was like being in a war. It never relented.
Ah, you asshole, what are you doing in there, playing with yourself? You goddamn whore, what do you know about anything? Sit there on your dead ass and sucking at the vino.
But there was a liveliness there because we both didn't care for shit, you know.
Don't hit me, don't hit me. You'd hit me, but you wouldn't hit a man. Hell no, I wouldn't hit a man. You think I'm crazy? Hey, where the hell are you going? I'm going to the fucking bar. Not without me, Buster.
So I thought I really had something. I did. I had lots of trouble.
to get our stools, to sit before the long mirror, to tell the bartender, vodka 7. Everything was far away then. The post office, the world, the past, and the future. To have our drinks arrive, to take the first hit in the dark bar. Life couldn't get any better.
What's your definition of love?
Love? It's kind of like, you know, when you see a fog in the morning when you wake up before the sun comes out. It's just there a little while and then it burns away.
Really?
Absolutely.
Burns away?
Yeah. Quickly. It's just, love is a fog that burns with the first daylight of reality. Okay, well, this is the post office where I carried mail for 2.5 years, coming up. A really terrible place for me.
There was about 4 or 5 of us that were substitute carriers at the Oakwood station. I think especially first impressions were bad with him. The guy didn't wear clothes well, and he himself was big, which could have been an asset, but he carried himself like a big galoot, you know. And he had this heavy face with these heavy features that had to grow on you.
Here it is. See where the United States Post Office. 2.5 years of hell. Pure hell.
He hated it, but don't blame the job, it was him. He just hated rules and regulations. He did as little as possible, and he and the boss were enemies and at odds, and the boss saw to it that he got all the dirty crap whenever he could dish it out to him.
I wasn't enthusiastic about my job as the others were. In fact, I hated it, and I guess he could tell. And how can you hate a good job, the United States government? Lifetime security. I'll probably carry this street right here, you know. I know the town.
For how long?
Oh, I only carried 3 or 4 years. I was a clerk the rest of the time. But still, you know it that way. You learn the cell numbers. You get the stink of L.A. in your bones, you know. You know it.
You call your childhood a horror story?
Oh, yes.
It was a horror story?
Oh, yes. Capital H.
Why?
Why? Have you ever been beaten with a razor strop 3 times a week from the age of 6 until 11? You know how many beatings that is?
Who was that, your father?
Yeah. So, you see, this was very good literary training for me. Beating me with that strop taught me something.
What did he teach you?
How to type.
What's the link?
The link is when you get the shit kicked out of you long enough and long enough and long enough, you will have a tendency to say what you really mean. In other words, you have all the pretense beat out of you. But my father was a great literary teacher. He taught me the meaning of pain. Pain without reason.
To the postmaster, Los Angeles, California, please accept my resignation as a regular carrier. Effective 3/11/55, I find this occupation is detrimental to my health. I am bothered with ulcers, and the pressure and demands of the job are aggravating my condition. The post office had treated me well, is only that I must seek a more congenial occupation, and I regret the severance. Henry C. Bukowski Jr.
I had ulcers, for a couple of years, very painful. I ignored them. I thought I was a tough guy. Finally, I just broke open. The blood came out of my mouth and my ass, and be surprised how much blood there is in a person. It keeps coming. And it's purple. Anyhow, they took me to the county general hospital, and that was a rough trip. As I left the hospital, a doctor told me, "You take one more drink, you're dead." See, doctors lie to you often. I was supposed to die, and I just didn't. And it kind of felt like I had a free life, an extra life to work with. So I came out of there, got a job driving a truck, drank a lot of beer each night, bought a typewriter, and just started typing. Only this time it all came out poetry. The prose had gone somewhere.
It's like the man who rose from the dead and he had a whole new life to live and did. I think that's often the case with a near-fatal illness in midlife. It sends someone off an entirely rejuvenated direction.
So I started writing hundreds of poems and sending them out. Poetry doesn't pay anything, but it was just a form I needed. It's kind of a passionate, pleasurable, selfish, nice form where you can scream a little bit, I guess I needed to scream a little bit now.
Sometimes in your mid-30s, your consciousness kind of explodes and takes wings, and that seems to happen with Hank. He wasn't doing it with his stories. These things come out in 1/10 the time of a short story, and because he had trained himself as a prose writer, how did the poems come out? They came out as stories. They were narratives. When I took her home, she said Big Red was the best horse she'd ever seen until I stripped down. That's from a Bukowski poem. I mean, what a great juxtaposition. All I can say is that while he was drinking all through the 50s and 60s, he produced more poetry than almost any other person on the planet that I know of. The discipline of sending those poems out, because you get lazy. You have to go to the stationery shop and get the 100 envelopes. You have to go to the post office and get, maybe the fact that he worked in the post office takes an enormous amount of energy, and he did it every day.
Now, he was a hard-working poet. He was known in 59 as King of the Little Magazines. He sends out thousands of poems without carbons. He didn't get them back. So he was known even then as King of the Little Magazines.
I use this street for racetracks, laundry. Sometimes I'm taking my laundry to the laundry. I keep driving all the way to the racetrack almost, because I'm so used to going to the racetrack. I say, hey, wait a minute.
But I went to the racetrack to use as a substitute for drinking. I was going to give up drinking and just use the racetrack. I had a girlfriend there, and I said, well, I can't drink. What am I going to do? She said, well, they're horses. I said, horses? What's that? He says, you go to the track and they race against each other. I said, how stupid. I mean, they have horses and they run against each other? He says, yeah, you bet on them. I said, God, that's so ignorant. I'm there almost every day.
This would have been back in the mid-50s. His idea was he was going to quit his job and follow the track wherever the horses were running, Del Mar, Hollywood Park, Santa Anita, and just be a full-time gambler. He went to the track initially in his life to try to make a killing so he could quit whatever he was doing and write full-time, which of course never happened.
I was at the track one day and I was late for the first race, but I parked, hustled in,
and I could feel this beer shit really coming on. Luckily, there was a stall, and I got my pants and shorts down real fast, and then it came. Hot, glorious, and stinking. When I got up and wiped, I looked down, and there was my wallet afloat. In all of it. I dipped in, got it, flushed, got out of the stall, washed up, walked out. Then the announcer said, "They're at the gate." I ran around the corner, found a betting window, pulled one of the bills out of my wallet and hollered, "10 win on the 9 horse." The seller picked up the bill and looked at it. Come on, I said. It's good, just a little wet. What the shit? The seller looked at me, hit the button, and I had the ticket. Then I went out and watched the race, and the 9 horse ran out.
When I don't go to the track, I can't write. I think it gives me, of course, you know, you analyze something, it goes away, you can't use it anymore, but I'll still take a gamble. Well, you go to the track, you see many, many faces all at once. Hundreds and hundreds of faces. And they all have the dream, they want to win. It's a big arena, and you just see what they want and what they don't get and what happens. It just opens, it tells me something.
He just said a few poems to that Barbara Fry, and she was ready to anoint him as the genius of the Western world, because she was getting poetry from all over, from her little magazine. And here's something that, wow, you know, it was like, it was atomic.
Barbara Fry edited a magazine out of Texas, and they got to writing letters. And as time went on, they started discussing the fact that they're both alone. He had broken with Jane at that time. He said, "I have a face like a ravaged lion." He was worried she'd see him and run the other way. She said, "I have a neck that won't turn. I was born with a neck that won't turn." And so he wrote back something like, "We're both wounded lions." And they decided to get married. This is by a long-distance love affair. So she pulls into L.A., and they go to Las Vegas and get a quick marriage.
Basically said that she was sweet and sexy, and at the same time, she was a rich girl. Her parents really had money in Texas. And like a lot of people, I'm sure, got involved with Bukowski through his charm, but then realized afterwards he was a handful. And ultimately, she thought that her money could control him, and of course it couldn't.
It's all based on the battle of the sexes with Bukowski. Here's the woman, here's the man.
Kids read his work and think, you know, he's a dirty old man and so forth. And I got flack because we started publishing Bukowski in 1972. And everyone was dumping on me. "What the hell are you doing publishing this dirty old man?" And I kept saying, this man is more of an artist than any other people we publish. I was asking someone what Freud would have thought of the 20th century. And she said, there's one thing Freud could not have foreseen, Walt Disney. Making everything cute, everything nice. When I wrote something about Bukowski to try to justify why I was publishing him, I said he is devoted to the de-Disneyfication of all of us. Someone has to kick the Mickey Mouse out of our heads.
He despised Mickey Mouse, especially his hands. I think he has 3 fingers. He could not handle the fact that the power over multi-millions of human beings was in the hands of this 3-fingered foolish creature that taught you nothing whatsoever, that expressed nothing real, total absurd fucking fantasy, not even good, not even creative. He was appalled by Mickey Mouse. And I said, well, what about Walt Disney? He was a crazy sort of a guy. He was eccentric. He was a genius. He was amazing. He was a visionary. He had all of these ideas. And he said, yeah, but for what? Well, I said, to expand the imaginations and fantasies of little children. Yeah, to this three-fingered son of a bitch who has no soul, for Christ's sake. Mickey Mouse doesn't have a fucking soul.
Dear Sirs, I was a regular carrier, Oakwood Station, with over 3 years' service. Last April, I resigned from the service. This letter is written in hope that I may be reinstated as a substitute carrier. I gave as my reason for resignation ill health. This, I will state bluntly, was an untruth. I realize now that I was in the wrong, and if I had only taken a little time to cool off and be objective, I never would have handed in my resignation. I hope to prove to you that I can be a carrier worthy of my salt. Oh, this is hilarious. The guy's talking corny stuff, worthy of my salt. The most uncorny guy in the world, you know, but I guess he's thinking of his audience. I promise that should you decide in my favor, that you will never regret the decision. Sincerely, H. Bukowski Jr., Los Angeles. You know, it really reads like somebody who grew up in the Depression, frankly, and who'd been through hard times.
Is that 12 years in the post office?
Really about 15, because I was a carrier for 3 years. And then I stuck for 12, 11 and a half, stuck letter.
But how could a man like you do that for such a long time? That's such a stupid work, only doing this.
All my work was stupid, but it was at night. That helped, because I can't sleep nights anyhow.
Of course, really what he was doing was getting a place that could be his little cave to write in. Once you get into a bureaucracy like the post office, it's a womb, and ultimately he may have hated it, but it was a regular paycheck. He knew he was going to get retirement. It was the thing that he'd made work for himself. He never really thought in his mind that he could live off his writing.
Yeah, I was writing all during that time. Around 1960, I started getting published. So.
And you were already successful at the time?
Oh no, successful, you mean I couldn't make a living? Hello? Yeah. She left for somewhere with the kid. She's pissed.
He was Bukowski, the loner who never gets lonely. When he was drunk, he had to have some companionship. And he found my letter, and it had my phone number, and that was why he called me. He was very charismatic anyway, but when he was drunk, it was even more so. And so it was like meeting an elemental force of some sort. When I met him, he was going to work at the post office at night, and he would write every day before he went to work. And so he didn't see me very often. I had been having unprotected sex for 2 or 3 years, ever since I got divorced, and I did not think that I was going to get pregnant. So when I did get pregnant, I think that it had to do with the change in my emotional state because of my reaction to Kennedy's assassination. Anyway, I did get pregnant. So I decided I'll just talk to Hank and see what he wants to do. So he suggested right off that we get married. And he was kind of taken aback that I didn't want to get married. I really loved him, but I did not ever want to get married again.
I
I collected everything in American literature, Melville, Henry James, Whitman, Faulkner, Scott Fitzgerald. And then I was looking for that in post-World War II writing. And I found the Beats, Ginsberg and Kerouac. And then one day I picked up a copy of The Outsider and read Bukowski, and all those people just faded into the background. This is the first letter I wrote Bukowski in October 1965, just saying, "Dear Bukowski, boy, are you a good poet." I was not a publisher at that time, and I had no idea that I would become one. I was managing a large office supply and office furniture and office printing company in Los Angeles, and the print shop was under my control. And after I had talked to Bukowski and saw the material he had, I decided I was going to do some broadsides of Bukowski. A broadside is the most inexpensive and least difficult way to publish anything. You print one side of a piece of paper with usually one poem on it or one paragraph.
Post office was a hard gig, I'd work all night, 11 years clerking. Then I had to write. Get up and start drinking and writing, then go to work. Same thing, get up, drink and write.
He really did suffer because, first of all, he was drinking too much. And the fact that he might skip a day without writing was just a terror for him. And then, in addition, there was a thing there at the post office called the scheme. He'd sit in a little plexiglass box, like a telephone booth. They give you 100 pieces of mail, and you have to throw with a certain percentage of accuracy within a given amount of time. And he said he would get up from that stool and walk out and leave a puddle of sweat on the floor.
Every 6 months, they had to be tested. And so he would study. He had a cheese box at home, sitting up behind his desk, which is an upright thing full of cubby holes. He'd empty everything out of that cheese box, and he would sit, and he'd have little cards with addresses on them, and he'd throw them and see how fast he could throw them. And that was a nightmare to him, to imagine that he might fail the schemes and thus lose his job.
I couldn't lift my arms anymore. They wouldn't lift up after a night's work. So I said, either got to get out of there or die, go crazy.
I was born on September 7th, 1964, and I just remember this little house in Los Angeles and Hank's typewriter.
Hank worked at night. Marina didn't sleep in the daytime. She didn't sleep at night either. I was never getting any sleep. I was dreadfully unhappy, and looking back, I was so sleep deprived that I was almost insane. And Hank liked a happy woman in the house. He liked you to be singing in the kitchen and so on. I mean, we didn't really talk about this until one day he sat down and said, "Oh, you're going to have to get out. I'll pay your rent up to what I can afford." And we didn't move very far away so that he could still see Marina. I used to take her over to his place whenever I ran out of money for food. I'd call him and say, "Can we come over for dinner?" And we did.
And he makes steak and lima beans, which I loved, of course, because he made it. I remember he liked to rest after he had a big meal, and of course I was little, wanted to play, so one of the things I liked to play was Batman and Robin, which went like this. You be Batman, Marina, and you can do things, and I'll be Robin because he doesn't do anything. And he would lie on the bed and just sort of snooze, and I would jump on the bed and be Batman. Certainly, I knew my father was very different than anyone else's father. My mom was very different too. And our lives were different, and all of our friends were different. So maybe that led me to feel it was positive instead of feeling like I wanted to fit in with something that I couldn't fit in with.
The genius of the crowd. There is enough treachery, hatred, violence, absurdity in the average human being to supply any given army on any given day.
And the best at murder are those who preach against it. And the best at hate are those who preach love. And the best at war, finally, are those who preach peace. Beware the average man, the average woman. Beware their love. Their love is average, seeks average. But there is genius in their hatred. There's enough genius in their hatred to kill you, to kill anybody. Not wanting solitude, not understanding solitude, they will attempt to destroy anything that differs from their own. Not being able to create art, they will not understand art. They will consider their failure as creators only as a failure of the world. Not being able to love fully, they will believe your love incomplete, and then they will hate you. And their hatred will be perfect, like a shining diamond, like a knife, like a mountain, like a tiger, like hemlock, their finest art.
To report today on a way to avert the legal problems which threaten mass inoculation against...
Do you like that music, that classical music? It's good. It's the only kind. I like it all. This is the best.
The people who were working on experimental newspapers and magazines were operating out of Eisenhower America. And Eisenhower America was dead. There wasn't a fucking thing happening in the whole country. Nothing. It was dead. These little magazines were, I think we printed 500 of that. I think we printed 1,000 of this. And they had no circulation. So I decided I'd much rather, I took some acid in January of 1963. I quit my job 2 days later. Underground newspapers who were promoting a new lifestyle and a new politics in America. And we made no attempt to be objective. We were totally subjective. We said objectivity was a lie. Before Open City came into being, it was very well known in little magazines. We all read him, but there weren't very many of us. I mean, there might have been a couple of thousand in the whole country who read these little magazines. So I put him on the streets in front of all the places where the hip bourgeois hung out in Hollywood. And within 6 months, he was a very famous man. He appeared in the first issue of Open City with a book review of a Hemingway book. And after that, we were getting ready with the second issue, and I said, I want you to do something once a week. And he said, what are we going to call it? He stank that day. I said he was a dirty old man. He'd been drinking all night, and his breath was terrible. I said, well, you're a dirty old man. Notes of a dirty old man.
Now, he said he didn't like all this hippie shit, and who are these people, and let them go work in a post office. They'll see what life is all about. Damn hippies. But he had a place where he could publish his stuff, which was a pretty rare opportunity for him, and so he used it for his own needs.
I saw somebody on a bus coming home from work, reading Open City, a working guy, half asleep laughing his balls off reading one of Bukowski's stories. And once you see that, they relate to a hard-working guy coming home from work and from a factory, and he's laughing at the story, you know that his potential was millions of people would enjoy his work.
Well, I was about, I don't know, maybe I was 21. I was living in a little apartment in Silver Lake with my dad, and I was reading the LA Free Press, and Notes from a Dirty Old Man was in there, and I just thought, this is remarkable. This guy's the writer of the century, and he's being published in this kind of street rag, which seemed kind of poetic and perfect for him to be there. And of course you felt much more like you had discovered him as well, and that he wasn't being brought to you, but you had to dig and find him.
We had a mutual friend, and he had a girlfriend named Mary. So they were having a party, and Bukowski and I were going to the party. And there was a guy watering his lawn and kind of trimming the edges. Can I come too? I'm all alone here. Bukowski says, yeah, come on up, man, bring a six-pack.
They all said, yes, yes, yes. And I said, hey, wait. He says, oh, come on, let me come along. I said, all right, come on.
And they got to talking, all of us, about the Vietnam War and how bad it was, and we're all against the war, and yeah, war is bad, Bukowski says.
He's talking about the war he's been in and how many people he killed. I said, bullshit, get out of here. And he said, you don't like me? I said, yeah, leave.
Suddenly the guy takes out a gun. And he says, I was in the war, and I believe in killing the enemy.
Suddenly I had no friends around me. They kind of disappeared away.
I tried to edge toward the kitchen. I was going to go out and get help. Maybe I was running, but I really think I was trying to edge out to get help.
So he came up behind me. He put the gun to my temple.
Bukowski puts his belly in the muzzle of the gun. He says, go ahead and kill me, man. I don't think you have the guts.
I said, I'm a suicide case anyhow. I've been wondering how to do this thing now. You solved my problem.
A couple more minutes went by because I couldn't edge out. He kept looking at me. So
and you've got a problem. Either life in jail or the electric chair.
The guy looks up at him. Come on, man. Go ahead. Kill me. The guy drops the gun and starts crying. I didn't mean it, you know.
The screen door slammed. He walked out.
So Bukowski picks up the gun, empties it.
All my friends came around. Oh, Hank, you are. I said, yeah, you guys were really great while I was in the... You really helped me, didn't you? Just standing, watching. You couldn't have grabbed him from behind or anything. Well, Hank goes, oh, okay.
Big hero or what? I think he just had psyched the guy out.
I lucked it. But I was really ready to go. It wouldn't have been a big thing.
John Martin could see. John Martin could feel the public out there. After a certain number of books, John Martin started to realize that there was going to be an audience for this writer, and that Bukowski needed to focus himself full time. And Bukowski was very resistant to that. If I go out there and lose my tenure at the post office, and lose my gig and my ability to support myself, and we fail, where do I go?
You see, this man came by while I was still in the post office. John Martin, he publishes my stuff, The Black Sparrow. He came by one night.
We sat down in his little dingy room and got out a piece of paper, and we figured out what it cost him to live. And he was putting down these amounts like $3.50 a month for cigarettes and $19 for food. You gotta remember, this is in the mid-60s. Rent was $80, child support was $15, and we came up with $100. And I said, you could really get along on $100 a month? And he said, yes. So I said, okay, I'll give you 25% of my income for life, whether this works or not, but you've got to quit and write full time. Very reckless. I didn't tell my wife.
So I'll give you $100 a month for the rest of your life, whether you write anything or not. That's pretty good, you know. Well,
It gets the rent anyhow. It may not get the child support, but it gets the rent. So that gave me some heart, you know.
But didn't you feel kind of odd, like casting your fate with this guy who's this hard-drinking kind of wild man?
No, because that was all overridden by the fact of who he really was, not the distorted part of him, but what he really stood for and what made him important. I mean, the first time I read him, I said, my God, this is today's Whitman. This is the man of the street writing for the people in the street. And when you get an opportunity, whether you're a banker or a hold-up man, you go for it. And there was Bukowski, and I thought, if this guy will commit his future work to me, that'll start me off. I said to him at the end of 1969, I know you're a poet, and that's what I'm planning to publish, and that's why I'm starting Black Sparrow Press, to publish your poetry. But if you ever could write a novel, that would be really great, because novels sell a lot better than books of poetry. But never thinking that he could or would. So he started work for me, $100 a month, on January 2nd, 1970. And he called me around the 25th of January and said in kind of a low-key way, come and pick it up. I said, well, pick up what? And he said, my novel. You said to write a novel. And I said, how could you write a novel in 3 or 4 weeks? And he said, fear.
Bukowski hated those pastoral beginnings. It was a beautiful land, rugged. There were snow-capped mountains in the distance. And Tom Haney came along in his old jalopy, you know, that oh my God, Bukowski would say, why do they start with crap like that? That isn't real. And so, how does Post Office begin? What is the first line? It began as a mistake. I mean, what a great opening. Then the reader thinks, well, what began as a mistake? My life, you know, as a postal worker for 12 years. And here's the story. What did he finally do? For all the pain, for all the trouble of working there, he brings us a humorous novel.
My name was Dom Muto, right? He changes it to Tom, which is legitimate. Moto, which is Japanese. I mean, didn't he realize that? No slur against the Japanese. It's a wonderful name either way. But where's his creativity? He could have called me Graziano or something, you know.
Was the book accurate?
The book was accurate.
You know, my dad spent a lot of time in the bars, so I was drawn to places like that, dark places. My dad drank in the afternoon in really dark bars. And so I guess that's how it began. And of course, it's much more than that. But the place that I hooked into him was the fact that he was seemed to be a writer of the common people and street people, and looking in the corners of the dark corners where no one seems to want to go, and certainly not write about. And so, yeah, he seemed like he was the writer for the dispossessed and the people who didn't have a voice.
I sold that collection to the University of California in Santa Barbara for $50,000. They were all first editions. This is back in the mid-'60s, and $50,000 was $50,000, and that's what I started with. And after about 2 years or 3 years, because I wasn't working, had no other income, I got down to $500. And I thought, well, it's back to work. This has been a great run, but it's over. And then that week, for the first time, more money came in than went out. And at that point, Bukowski and I were on our way.
Anybody who's feeling the ups and downs in a capitalist society feels good at reading about a guy who is actually preaching the refusal to work. But factotum preaches is the refusal to work, not the abnegation of the Protestant work ethic, but, the fundamental wrongness of it all. The incredible waste of a life dictated by others.
He was a magic man. I saw him shrink once, actually. I was at Linda King had a party, and she invited me, and I probably shouldn't have gone because he didn't invite me. And Linda King was ferociously flirting with every man there. It was very awkward, kind of silly. So at the end of the party, there's like 8 or 9 people left, and I'm next to the door, and out of nowhere, he's at the door. There's 8 or 9 of us, and he just started this rage. He's about 6 foot, 5'11", 6 foot, and I was watching him. And it's just I didn't understand any of the words, but it was like a volcano was erupting, and everybody's kind of stuck in place. And I'm looking at him, and he started to reduce in size and height proportionally. I swear to God, and I believe in God. I swear to God, he was 2.5 feet tall. As I see my hand now, I saw him too, and I just didn't want to. I didn't want him to get big again, so I turned around and went right out the front door.
I was with my girlfriend, and she had her foot up there. I was going in circles in the street, stopping, starting, stunting. Her heel did that when she's bracing herself. She thought we were going to die, but we didn't. It's a nice design. I like it. The car's beginning to look like me.
I used to think a long time ago I was too ugly for women, but I found out women are very strong people. If you have something good to give them, like your feelings, women are strong. They don't care if you have 1 arm or 5 fingers missing or your nose blown off. If you just...
No such luck. Women was the book that Hank was writing, was it? When I met him. Yes, as a matter of fact, because he was doing what he called research. It started out with a woman who he had been with for a long time, Linda King, and he was sort of breaking up with her. When he got a little bit of notoriety, women started coming to him. And he had the opportunity to sort of take his pick and just sort of have experiences. And like a child almost, he was discovering this whole world of women in a way that he hadn't. And then he was involved with this other one named Cupcakes O'Brien.
I thought of him more as a friend. He was, to me, more of a father figure. I didn't take the relationship that seriously. I can't say that I ever was in love with him. So he would sing to me occasionally the song that went and to this day I don't know that I've ever heard it. I don't know if it's a real song or if it was one he just made up, but it goes something like mean to me, why must you be so mean to me?
Mean to me, how can you be mean to me?
This is before my time.
How can you be mean to me?
So yeah, he was crazy about her, and she had him at her beck and call. In other words, she didn't care. She could go off for a week and not even think about him, and he would just agonize the whole week. That one poem about the confused old man driving around in the rain.
Cupcake. No. All right. Go ahead. You're waiting for her, yeah? No. She'll be mad for a week.
Why are you so mean to me? Why must you be mean to me? Gee, honey, it seems to me you love to see me crying.
I remember once going over to his place on Carlton Way, and there was a beat-up old couch on the porch in front, and here's these two absolutely untouched, beautiful, blonde Dutch girls waiting for him to come home. And they wanted to know where he was. I said, well, I guess he's at the track, but I'm meeting him at 5 o'clock. And they said, oh, we want to see Bukowski. I said, well, what do you want to see him for? I said, oh, to fuck him.
While reading your book, Women, one could get the impression that for you, a woman is nothing more than a behind and a pair of tits.
Oh, come on. You read it and that's all you got? You didn't even get the parts where I cried in bed because tears came to my face because I invited two women to have Thanksgiving with me, and I didn't know which one to go to. I mean, no, there are many moments in there where I looked like a complete asshole, and I felt like one. No, I just wasn't jumping into bed and fucking and jumping out of bed. I'm sorry. It would be nice for me to say that and pretend I'm the tough guy, but I'm not that tough.
But in your stories, love is always a synonym for sexual intercourse.
Where do you
That's not too romantic.
Where do you get this crap, baby? Love is a dog from hell. That's all. It has its own agonies. It brings its own agonies with it. But I mean, I don't know where you get your concepts from, man. You're really fucked up.
You know, I remember that there was a moment where he and I talked about it, in the sense that accusations of misogyny. He said really simply, you know, everybody who's read it knows that on a percentage basis, I treat men worse every time. You know, and in essence, he does, because so much is autobiographical, and it's about making mistakes in a messy world.
Oh, this is called the shower. We like to shower afterwards. I like the water hotter than she. And her face is always soft and peaceful. And she'll wash me first, spread the soap over my balls, lift the balls, squeeze them, then wash the cock. Hey, this thing is still hard. Then get all the hair down there, the belly, the back, the neck, the legs. I grin, and then I wash her. Another kiss, and she gets out first, toweling, sometimes singing while I stay in. Turn the water on hotter, feeling the good times of love's miracle. Linda, you brought it to me. Sorry. When you take it away, chew it slowly and easily. Make it as if I were dying in my sleep instead of in my life. Amen. See? I'm getting this way. Sentimental. Shit, I'm sorry. That's the one I split with after 5 years. It's not a very good reading. Linda, yeah. I read you the wrong poem. Shit. Getting softer and softer, kid.
And during that time, I met him at a poetry reading in LA at the Troubadour. But he was still doing all this research with women, so I had no intention of becoming a girlfriend or anything. So we just sort of evolved a friendship, and I was somebody he'd always call on the phone, and he'd talk to me about all these other women, and then it just got more and more involved, and the women came in and out and went through his life, and finally his research was complete. And I ended up there. They were all gone. We got rid of them.
He did a beautiful painting for this. We reproduced that, and it's still on the cover. This book is in about a 30th printing. And then he used to send me these letters that women would write him who got the book. He received a torrent of mail, hundreds of these letters, all begging to meet him and offering him all kinds of delightful experiences. And here's one. This woman has decided to take off all her clothes and lay in a tub and read women. She would very much like to meet him. So she was trying to make a connection there.
When they started coming around, I said, now I'm going to catch up on all that I haven't had, you see. One night I was in bed with 6 different women in a row.
Oh.
I felt, God, I must be something. But I wasn't, I was just catching up on my own background. So finally I got ashamed of what I was doing and I stopped. But I got a novel out of it. Yeah.
And how's your sex life these days?
Fair to middling. How's yours?
What's about to cross over there, Zimiro?
Well, that. Well, that's Germany. I was born there, see. This reminds me.
You know what kind of cross it is?
Not really.
Iron Cross.
Iron Cross.
He had published little fragments in magazines and in little chapbooks about his early life. And I really wanted him to write a novel about his life from the time he was born, basically, until he graduated from high school.
What about this book that you're writing now, the book on childhood?
3/4 finished. It's a horror story. And it's been harder to write than the others. But I've tried to put in some lightness and some humor so we won't really feel the utter grimness of my childhood.
When he finally got to the point where he could write about his childhood, I think that was a cathartic experience for him. It was a struggle for him to write it, and it took many years for him to even get to that point, to be able to get back in there and relive it somewhat by typing it out and remembering certain terrible things. And but I think by doing that, it really it relinquished him from a lot of those terrors and those terrible experiences.
Bukowski's grandfather came from Germany and somehow ended up in Pasadena, California, where apparently he was a building contractor. He had several children, one of whom, of course, is Henry Bukowski Sr., who was a doughboy and went back to Germany as an American soldier, and in the little town of Andernach on Rhine, met Bukowski's mother. They get together, and Hank is conceived and born, and they stay in Andernach for a couple of years, then come to the U.S., back to Los Angeles. And Bukowski's father was a milk delivery man for a while, had a lot of odd jobs. They didn't have a lot of money, but they had a pretty nice place on Longwood Avenue, finally, at least by the Depression years.
This is 2122 Longwood Avenue. The house of horrors, the house of agony, the house where I was almost done in, but not quite. I'm still here, you see. This is the lawn that I manicured. I had to mow it both ways. This way first, then this way. And I had to get all the hairs with the shears. If I missed one hair, I got a beating. One hair. It's very hard not to miss one hair. Try it sometime. So I always got a beating. The old man had a razor strap. He used to hang here and he'd just pick it off. Drop your pants and your shorts. I would stand about here and he would begin. And I don't know how many lashes he'd give me. They'd be hard. 8, 10, 12, 14.
course, you can't help screaming, especially when you're 6 years old, 7 years old. As I got around to be about 10 or 11 or 12, I screamed less. In fact, last beating I got, I didn't scream at all. I just didn't make a sound. And I guess that terrorized him because that was the last one when I didn't make a sound. I don't know, it's just a terrible place to stand and talk about it. Really don't want to talk about it too much.
He was cruel, man. He beat me and beat me.
What's your mother?
She was German, and her expression was, while he was beating me, "Your father is always right." That's all there was to it. I guess he was right now and then, but I figure about 86% of the time he was wrong as hell.
Hank's father's values were probably normal American values. There's nothing evil about him at that level. Beating a child is evil. There's the evil part. On the other hand, that was a tradition. People did it all through the centuries. If you go back to Leviticus, if your son speaks against you, you're able to kill him. So we've come a long way since then, you know. It's not like Henry Bukowski was alone in the beating of the son.
He was an asshole, he was a coward, and his blood is in my blood. And sometimes I feel it happening to me, you know, when I'm arguing with a woman or something, I feel kind of shitty and crappy, and I'm not quite just. And sometimes I think that's my father's blood in me, a chicken shit blood that I've got in me. It's a bad feeling.
This is a picture of Hank from his high school graduation, and this is a picture that's been touched up, as you can see. His face was really quite pockmarked. It was very noticeable. He wasn't interested in having his picture taken. He made sure that he was never in any of the pictures that the kids took.
We all know what acne is, but acne vulgaris is sort of an exaggerated form of that ailment. And he had to go all the way across town to a doctor. They would stick needles into all of these horrible, huge pus-filled things on his face and on his neck and all over his back, his arms, chest. It finally manifests physically when you're put down like that continually over years and years, physically, emotionally, mentally, in every way.
If you know that wonderful chapter in Ham on Rye, where he's standing outside his senior prom, too disfigured to go in, and too ashamed to go in, and he had wrapped toilet paper around his head, and then punched eye holes. And the bleeding acne was starting to come through the toilet paper. And he just stood there and watched all of the other children graduating from high school and having a wonderful time while he stood out there in the dark.
I was on some fucking bus with a girlfriend, and here came a guy walking toward us looking for a back seat. His scars were deeper than mine. And you want to know something? I was jealous.
Jealous?
Yeah. I said, Jesus. I said, did you see him? She said, yes, I did. I said, oh, shit. What a beautiful man he was.
Hank actually stayed with his parents quite a long time for a guy who was brutalized. I have some photos in 1944, and there's Bukowski with his mother and father in the backyard of the house on Longwood. The three of them are standing together getting a photo. So he may have hated them in a certain way, but he always returned to the nest.
Why you drive such a long way to the laundry?
Because other laundries use soap that make you itch and all that. So this is the best laundry in town, that's all.
Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. Strangers with faces like the backs of thumbtacks, Armies running through streets of blood, waving wine bottles, bayoneting and fucking virgins. Or an old guy in a cheap room with a photograph of Marilyn Monroe. There is a loneliness in this world so great that you can see it in the slow movement of the hands of a clock. People so tired, mutilated, either by love or by no love. People are just not good to each other one-on-one. The rich are not good to the rich. The poor are not good to the poor. We're afraid. Our educational system tells us that we can all be big-ass winners. It hasn't told us about the gutters or the suicides, or the terror of one person aching in one place alone. The beads will swing, the clouds will cloud, and the killer will behead a child like taking a bite out of an ice cream cone. Too much, too little, too fat, too thin, or nobody. More haters than lovers. People are not good to each other. Perhaps if they were, our deaths would not be so sad. Meanwhile, I look at young girls, stems, flowers of chance. There must be a way. Surely there must be a way we've not yet thought of. Who put this brain inside of me? It cries, it demands. It says there's a chance. It will not say no.
As Linda, the second Linda, came into his life, she hung in there, and he knew that she really cared about him, and she was there to stay. She could hold her own with a lot of Bukowski's, wild friends, but ultimately she had a certain focus, and I give her a lot of credit for saving his life. I mean, at a certain point, she got him out of East Hollywood. They bought a place down in San Pedro. It's a great part of Los Angeles not many people really know about, and probably added about 10 years to Bukowski's life. Basically, it allowed him a different part of his life. He continued to write, and he continued to get more and more famous.
He wrote through it all, and as he became more popular and became more successful and famous, really, he wrote about that. So he took you all the way from flop houses to San Pedro, and where he's living in a nice house with, neighbors who play golf and, have nice cars, and so he took you, he let you go with him on his journey, which was really great for me, to have somebody I looked up to take you down the path with him.
Barbet Schroeder didn't have enough money to make Barfly, the film, yet, and so he decided to get some professional people and do a documentary on Hank, sort of interviewing him over a period of several months, coming over here on weekends for hours after hour after hour, and sitting inside and outside. And one night he was interviewing Hank, and it had been a long day, and Hank had had 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 bottles of wine, and he was getting a little belligerent.
I've always been used because I'm the good guy. And women, when they meet me, they say, I can use this son of a bitch. I can push him around. He's an easygoing guy. So I do it. But finally I get to resent it a bit.
What do you resent?
Just being pushed.
Pushed?
Yeah. Just being pushed.
Why do you let yourself be pushed by this kind of shit, you idiot? Why do you allow yourself to be pushed by this sort of thing?
I've told you 1,000 times to leave. You won't leave.
Wait a minute. No, wait. That doesn't have anything to do with it.
Tell you to leave.
That doesn't have anything to do with it. Why do you continually allow yourself to be pushed?
Because I'm kind-hearted. I'll give the other person another chance.
You do?
I've given you dozens of chances. You keep pushing. And You keep laughing at me. That's why I'm going to tell you. I'm getting an attorney. I'm going to get your ass moved out of here. She thinks I don't have the guts. She thinks I can't live without her. I can move your ass out of here so bright and so fast with a Jewish attorney. You're going to feel like your ass is skinned, baby. You think you're the last woman on earth that I can get?
Never haven't thought about it.
Yeah, well, you better start thinking. I'm turning you over to the next.
Next what?
Next guy. He can have you. I won't be the least bit jealous. With your Mayor Baba bullshit, all your goddamn staying out every night bullshit. I don't need the kind of woman you are.
Night after night going out. What good are you? I'm going to get my Jewish lawyer out on you, and he's going to get you out of this house. Get out. And I mean, it was just mortifying. And the camera was rolling. I mean, they had a perfect thing going there. This is pretty exciting. Why are you so offended by me doing something else?
Because I live with a woman, or she lives with me. She doesn't live with other people.
I do live with other people, and I'm going to for the rest of my life.
I know I'm going to turn you over to them. Don't you see?
No.
What shit? You fucking punk! You think you walk out on me every fucking night? You fucking whore! You bitch! Who do you think I am? Just, I'm going to do this, live with other people? You fucking shit!
That's when I got my guts. I never took it again. Never. The next time he tried that, I said, "You son of a bitch. You can scream your ass off at the clouds in the sky and at yourself, but you're not going to do it to me. I'm not going to take it anymore." And I'd just get up, walk up the stairs, and I'd listen to him ranting and raving down here at nobody. Sometimes it'd go on for about 30 minutes and just screaming out.
She learned a strategy for dealing with him, and I saw that evolve over the years, where at a certain point she would just, he would be baiting her, and I could see he was trying to get this response. He was trying to get the fire going, and he wanted to get the fight going, you know, and Linda would just sit there and clench her teeth. I could see her jaw clenching, and she would say, "That's right, Papa. You're right. You are absolutely right." And she would just agree with everything he said, and then he would just sigh and just kind of growl because he was so angry, because you just can't fight with yourself, you know, and she just wouldn't do it.
Dearly beloved friends, we are gathered here in the presence of God and His company.
He seemed happy to be getting married, and it's something he definitely wanted to do, and he really did love Linda all along, and I think it took a while for him to get warm up to the idea that he was going to get married, you know.
To be your lawful wedded wife, to love, cherish, and honor throughout all the days of your lives.
He cried at the wedding in front of the minister. It got very teary for him.
Mickey Rourke, he didn't like the idea of rehearsal. Faye Dunaway, she was ready to rehearse as much as possible, and I wanted to rehearse because when you are on a tight schedule like that, it's much better if you have rehearsed. But no, so we had to do without it, and I guess he wanted to stay fresh.
Well, how could Mickey Rourke portray Hank? It's an impossibility. Why didn't they get some old duffer? They wanted Mickey Rourke to be Humphrey Bogart and pick up girls in the bar. Hank wasn't like that, really. I remember there were some really beautiful girls in there, which weren't at all the kind of girls that Hank went after. He went after people who were slightly damaged.
He really overdid it, you know, the hair hanging down. I don't think the kid's ever been on Skid Row, you know. When the guy walks in, he says, "Oh, I've been missed. I should run for mayor." Didn't get it right. Because I'd walk in, I'd say, "Oh, I've been missed. I guess I should run for mayor." So you don't brag it. It's low-key all the time. He had it all kind of exaggerated, untrue, a little bit show-off about it. So, no, it was kind of misdone. I found out that Hollywood is more crooked, dumber, crueler, stupider than all the books I've read about it. They didn't go deeply enough into how it lacks art and soul and heart, how it's really a piece of crap. There are too many hands directing, there are too many fingers in the pot, and they're all kind of ignorant about what they're doing, and they're greedy, and they're vicious. So you don't get much of a movie.
I never got to meet him whilst I was reading him. It was only later, after a really drunken night with Sean Penn, back in my house in Dublin, talking stupid rhymes, really.
And found out that he was a great fan of Hank's. And I said, you know, he's a friend of mine. No. I said, yeah.
He was reciting, you know, some of Hank's verse and me back to him. And he got up, excused himself to make a phone call.
He said, "Hey, kid, where the hell are you?" I said, "Well, I'm over here, and I'm with Bono." He says, I said, "Ask Linda." He says, "Who's Bono?"
Turns out that Hank's old lady had been to every U2 show since we were like kids, like garage band. She'd been to every one of them. She'd been to more U2 shows than I'd been to.
Linda's back on, saying, you know, if you guys play out here, we want to come. Well, sure enough.
Invited the two of them down when we next played Los Angeles, not ever thinking they would come. But they did come.
I think it was fascinating to him that the world had come to, you know, this wasn't a political rally, this was musicians on stage and this many people and this kind of fandom, and this, all of a sudden in the middle of the show, he says, he comes to the microphone and says, "This is for Charles and Linda Bukowski."
And I think we got to the old fucker because, you know, I think we might have moved him a little bit.
The crowd went crazy. They knew who he was. And he was taken off guard. You know, he really was. And got emotional, I think. And he and Linda danced to the song together.
Bukowski was fortunate enough to see in his own lifetime his own work be translated into, I don't know, God knows how many languages, to make him more than a comfortable living, and to go out in, you know, 30 or 40 printings. And, you know, that's a very rare thing for a poet. If he hadn't made any money and yet he had been able to do all the writing, that would have been enough for him. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And he would have worked in a candy store if he had to, or shining shoes, or he would have stayed at the post office and retired on some piddly-ass little thing.
I'm afraid I have to agree with John William Corrington and his prediction, which he made in, 1962. He was totally right. He said, by the end of the century, Bukowski will be known as the guy who liberated poetry from the clutches of the academics and did what Wordsworth was attempting to do and what Rimbaud actually did. You know, this is the company that he put him in 62 when nobody had heard of him.
Are you afraid of death?
No.
How old would you like to be?
It's not a matter of how old you can become, how long you can go having all your moxie. So I can't answer that. So I think my light is dwindling now. You know, I went to the track today. I came back from the track I looked down, and I had on one black shoe and one brown shoe. So I said, even though I won $212 betting the horses, I looked down, I said, the light is dwindling, old boy.
He continued to lessen the amount of alcohol intake over the years, even though that meant he had to be less than his myth.
I think he found a kind of confidence in himself, of course, when he became successful. And that took away a lot of the psychological pressure that had been on him for so many years. He didn't need to react so much. He knew that he was a cause of goodness, and that he could be a cause of goodness. And I don't think he felt that way about himself in the past, in his early years, or in his mid-years even.
And by the time he got to Last Night of the Earth poems, he's really a wise man and a very thoughtful man, and was not afraid to be vulnerable. He was turning the ball around in front of you and let you see as many sides as he could see himself.
There's a thing called the New Formalism. And there's a little group of people called the New Formalists. And they want to go back to sonnets and, you know, poetry at its most structured. And to me, it's exactly the wrong way poetry should be headed. Oh, this is a little New Year's greeting that we did, called Art. And it's one of his greatest poems. It's just one word above the other. As the spirit wanes, the form appears. As an artist or a poet or anybody loses the spirit that first brought them into whatever they do, as that wanes, they do get more concerned with form and try to cover up the fact that they're not writing as well anymore by writing formal work.
Pulp dedicated the bad writing. That just is the Bukowski story right there. Not that he wrote badly, but that he took chances. That was an older man's novel, and yet it's so filled with a younger man's inventiveness and suppleness. Hollywood got at L.A., let's say, from this way, and Pulp got at L.A. this way, right? And Hammond Rye got in L.A. this way. Think about it. And then the short stories came on L.A. that way, and then the poems rushed down the freeway this way. You know, it was that ruined landscape of Los Angeles that he wrote about. Pulp, of course, is a pure fantasy. It isn't the real life Bukowski. So a fantasy, though, is the life of the mind. So it was something that was always on his mind. The man was dying. He was nearing the end of his life, and he writes about Lady Death. That's how he dealt with his dying, to make art out of it.
It had been a long haul, and it was coming to the end. And he was in and out of consciousness in the room at the hospital. We were just sitting there with him, not just whispering gently a little bit and just being around him. And I was sort of sitting a few feet towards his feet, and his head was in front of me. And I had been looking over on the other side of his bed to Marina, his daughter, and I glanced at Hank, and there were, he was emitting from his mouth little puffs, like just gentle little puffs. And I instantly realized that these were his last breaths. I knew that that was what was happening then. And in a matter of several seconds, I suppose, well, I got up to him to come to his face and hold him, and that happened a few more moments. And then he left. And at that moment, his face became absolutely transparent and serene. Every wrinkly scar, tension, everything completely relaxed. And there was an utter tranquility that existed and permeated everything at that point. And it was so gentle and so pure, and he had a smooth face like a newborn baby. It was just so smooth and soft like that.
There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say stay in there. I'm not going to let anybody see you. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I pour whiskey on him and inhale cigarette smoke. And the whores and the bartenders and the grocery clerks never know that he's in there. There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too tough for him. I say, stay down. Do you want to mess me up? Do you want to screw up the works? You want to blow my book sales in Europe? There's a bluebird in my heart that wants to get out, but I'm too clever. I only let him out at night sometimes when everybody's asleep. I say, I know you're there, so don't be sad. Then I put him back, but he's singing a little in there. I haven't quite let him die. And we sleep together like that, with our secret pact. And it's nice enough to make a man weep. But I don't weep. Do you?